Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into the deeply disturbing and unsolved murder of Nanette Krentel. It's a case that kicks off with a suspicious fire and, believe it or not, ends with an attack on free speech.
Those are the absolutely chilling words of 49-year-old Nanette Krentel, words she sent to her own family. She was living in fear for her life, and as it turns out, her fears were tragically, horrifically realized.
So, let's dive into this. It's an unsettling mystery, where the search for a killer takes a very sharp, very strange turn, and authorities end up targeting a private citizen for doing nothing more than speaking his mind.
Our story begins on a hot July afternoon down in Lacombe, Louisiana. It was July 14, 2017, and first responders were racing to a massive house fire. But what they were about to find in the ashes was absolutely no accident.
The fire itself was just incredibly intense, so much so that it caused the entire home to collapse in on itself. And it was inside those smoldering ruins that investigators made a truly grim discovery: the body of the homeowner, Nanette Krentel.
Now, at first glance, you might think it's a tragic accident, but the coroner's report, it revealed a shocking truth. Pathologists found zero soot in Nanette's airway. Now, what does that mean? It means she wasn't breathing when the fire started. She was already gone. The real cause of death? A single gunshot wound to the head. This wasn't an accident. This was a homicide, staged to look like one.
In pretty much any homicide investigation, the first person the police look at is the spouse. And in this case, the husband's profession immediately sent up some major red flags.
Nanette's husband was Steve Krentel, and he was the local fire chief. His expert knowledge of how fires work, how to start them, how to control them, that immediately put him on the suspect list. And there was a motive. Steve was having an affair, and Nanette had just found out.
So, the case against Steve Krentel really seemed to be building steam. But then, investigators hit a major roadblock that just completely changed the entire course of the investigation.
It turns out Steve Krentel had a solid alibi. He was at the fire station from 8 in the morning, right up until the fire was reported. And what's more, there's some grainy drive-through footage that seems to show Nanette alive around 10 a.m., long after Steve was already on the clock at work.
So based on that alibi and the fact that he was cooperating, he even passed a polygraph test. The sheriff's office took a very unusual step. They put out a public statement officially clearing Steve Krentel as a suspect. This was just 2 months into the investigation.
But for a lot of people, especially the online sleuths following this case, that official clearing it didn't add up. Their suspicion kept coming back to one key detail: the perfectly destroyed evidence.
You see, the Krentel home was basically a fortress. It had multiple security cameras, and yet on the day of the murder, every single one of them failed. The DVR, the machine that holds all that footage, was burned so badly that even the FBI couldn't recover a thing. And the real kicker? The fire was started right where that DVR was located. A lot of people found that coincidence just impossible to believe.
So, with the husband officially cleared, investigators had to turn their attention to the other man in Nanette's life, a man she had explicitly told her family she was afraid of.
The investigation then zeroed in on Steve's brother, Brian Krentel. Brian had a pretty violent history and a very, very troubled relationship with Nanette.
Just listen to this. In an email to her own father, years before her death, Nanette wrote that terrifying message. She documented a direct threat from Brian that he would set her house on fire and kill her. I mean, it's a chillingly accurate prediction of her own murder.
And Brian had a clear motive. He blamed Nanette and Steve for an arrest. His criminal record was long. We're talking at least 15 convictions for things like DWI and even battery on an officer. He was, by all accounts, a very credible and very dangerous suspect.
So, we've got two pretty credible suspects, right? A husband with motive and expertise, but a solid alibi, and a brother-in-law with a violent history who made direct threats. And yet, as the case just went cold, the only person who got arrested had absolutely nothing to do with the murder.
So years go by. No arrests are made. As the community's frustration started to grow, one man took to the internet to voice his opinion. And what happened next was a really shocking and frankly unconstitutional turn of events.
Jerry Rogers Jr., just a local citizen, he expressed his frustration online with the stalled investigation. In response, the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office got a search warrant for his messages, and get this, they cited a criminal code that didn't even exist. Even after being warned by the DA's office that arresting him would be illegal, they did it anyway. They arrested him, strip-searched him, and jailed him for his speech.
The whole thing just reeked of retaliation. The department issued a press release about Rogers' arrest before he was even booked into jail, which is highly unusual. Then after his release, they even complained to his employer. A federal court later agreed these actions were clearly meant to humiliate him and violated his First Amendment rights.
Rogers spent nearly 4 years in court just fighting for the right to sue the officers who wrongfully arrested him. He was up against a legal doctrine called qualified immunity, which is this powerful shield that makes it incredibly difficult to hold government officials accountable, even when they violate a citizen's constitutional rights. And this brings us right back to the central tragedy of it all. All these years later, despite 2 primary suspects, despite a mountain of suspicious circumstances, the number of people arrested for the murder of Nanette Krentel remains exactly 0.
The case is still unsolved, and a family is left completely without answers. It forces us to ask a deeply troubling question. In the failed search for justice for Nanette, did the authorities create another victim by attacking the very constitutional right that allows citizens to demand justice in the first place?